Hi, hello, and how are you? Come on in and stay a while. It's time to get coached up with another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. Invite a friend, share this with a friend, please. And hey, just know that this show allows you, the viewer, to connect with some of the best sports minds, sports figures, and people in the entertainment industry around the globe. If you're listening to us in podcast form, my guest Scotty and I tell you to turn that knob up. We're about to put that sports flavor in your ear. Hey, I'm excited to be here with you today. My name is Coach Scott Fields. I'm your host. And our guest today, I'm going to tell you what, super excited about this. Scotty and I was just talking about this off camera. This has been a few years in the works, and phenomenal author, uh, covered professional and college sports since the 1980s. He's been an award winner with the Basketball Writers Association, the Associated Press Editors. This man is phenomenal. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the book you see in the background, but Kingdom on Fire, great book. Scott Howard Cooper, welcome to the show, my friend.
It is great to be here, and there's no chance in the world I'm going to live up to that intro.
No, you're going to exceed it. Our viewers are in for a treat. Uh, let's go back to the very beginning with your childhood. Where did the bug start to become such a great storyteller and a writer? I mean, you've been a freelance writer, you've been a senior writer, you've been in broadcast, author of books, but where did that really all come from?
Well, you're looking at the luckiest guy in the world because of the people that I have met on my journey who have lifted me up on their shoulders. Uh, it wasn't so much a bug as just something that happened. It was nothing that I planned. It wasn't like growing up. I thought I wanted to be a writer, or I love sports certainly, and enjoyed watching on TV. And I was fortunate to grow up in Southern California in an era of Vince Scully and Chick Hearn and Dick Enberg. So you learn an awful lot about journalism that way. And there were several daily newspapers in Los Angeles at the time that I was reading. So it was around me, but it wasn't anything that I necessarily said, boy, that's what I want to do. It was a fluke because a friend of mine in high school, my sophomore year, we were talking about classes and needing to fill up a schedule. And he says, you know what, this journalism teacher's a great guy. The class is really fun. If nothing else, you should take it just for the fun. And that's how it all started. And when I talk about being fortunate along the way, I had the best journalism teacher, the best teacher in the world. And one of those people, I hope that everybody has their Skip Nicholson, that teacher that at some point, whether high school or another level, made that kind of difference. He made that difference for me. He got me interested in journalism. And then I was fortunate to go on to meet a lot of people and just felt very fortunate.
Man, I love hearing stories like that of people who have a passion and have a purpose. And then here you go, you get into this journalism class. What was it about his class? Did he just instill confidence, or did he just bring the storyteller out of you? What was it that was just like it just clicked for you?
I think the confidence part was certainly a large portion of it because I did not have much. That was part of it. It was a lot of encouragement. He just sort of said, you know what, I think you got a little something here. I hope you come back for next semester. And then that next semester, it was, um, let's continue with this. And it was just very, very fortunate. And his dedication, he was one of those teachers that did not punch a time clock. He invested. Um,
Oh.
and that means he would stay late to help get the newspaper done. These were in the days before computers. So it was a lot of setting by hand and doing layouts on paper with a ruler and a pencil. And he was in for the long haul. It was not a let's do it. We have six period journalism. Okay, now we're done. Let's move on to the next topic. And then I
I
got
lo-
into, yeah, and then I got in at the Los Angeles Times. pretty early in my life, and that was a while I was going to college at the same time, and working at the LA Times in the sports department in the 1980s was a master's class
Wow.
in journalism, surrounded by talent. People will recognize some of the names, but even the names that they don't recognize, the people that were in the office doing layout and editing and headlines and just picking up that work ethic and learning what works and what doesn't work. And when I say that you're looking at the luckiest guy in the world, there's a long list of reasons, and it all starts there in my teen years, early 20s.
I love that. Now, were you able to kind of like, did you work for like the high school yearbook, or did you do like any writing where like the high school newspaper to just kind of cut your chops, or was it just that journalism class and then you just went through the process and progressed and continually got better?
Yeah, I did the high school newspaper. I did not do yearbook, but I did the newspaper. And then there was a local small paper in our area that I would sort of work my way up, that you'd go out and cover a football game on a Friday night and rush back to the office and turn on the electronic typewriter and put the paper in and crank the wheel. And I started that way, which is the way I think a lot of people did. And being at the LA Times at a young age was very unusual, and what did not offer many chances to write. But I was on the school paper at USC at the same time, so I was getting to write quite a bit then. So there was a good mix going on.
What was so you went to USC, and of course, I've got here that you studied political science, but being in USC, what were some of the first stories that you were able to cover, and what excited you about covering that story?
The chance to own something, I think, that you sort of immerse yourself. These are probably phrases I wasn't aware of at the time when I when I thought about why I'm loving doing it. I thought it was just great that I was going out to sporting events and getting to write about them. And it was a terrific staff we had at the Daily Trojan. A lot of people that went on to great success. Some people in journalism. We had one photographer, really nice guy, 6'10", played a little baseball, and he ended up pursuing baseball instead of photography. And I hope that things worked out for Randy Johnson. Um,
The
so
unit. Oh,
so it was just it was the I think it was just flat out fun, and you really have to have that in any job, right? I don't think
that's
that
right.
this is anything with journalism in particular, but especially one that is going to require long hours and not a great deal of pay unless you make it to a certain level. Um, I did kind of everything over the years in college for the school paper. It was swimming and basketball, some of the football, some baseball, track. It was just a lot of fun. We had a great staff that made it fun, but then just I got to deal with a lot of really good people.
See, I love hearing that because I'm a true believer, Scott, that you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. Talking about the early 80s, Southern California, a hotbed for talent and sports, Magic needed Bird. Who was the guy that kind of inspired you? Not that you were in competition with, but you just knew that he was so good and talented that you kind of maybe mirrored yourself after that person early in your career.
Well, being at the LA Times at that point in my life, it was really just a matter of showing up at the office and you have 10 or 15 examples in front of you every day. I don't know that I could pick out one from that stage. I just knew that any direction I turned, I was looking at people who had incredible talent, and most cases were really good people as well. And
Wow.
you
Love
learn.
hearing that. And obviously you got that itch and, hearing your story just a few seconds ago, talking about, getting a pen and paper and writing it out and, and then going back to the typewriter and then spending hours and then edits and then, overcoming, maybe writer's block or something, or maybe you were a perfectionist and had to, get it out just right. Talk about the advances in technology and how that's changed for writers.
Incredible. It's made an amazing difference. The funny thing is, as technology has gotten better and supposedly made things faster, I don't have to deal with this anymore, but anybody who reads a newspaper or works on a newspaper will tell you that the production and the deadlines have gotten more difficult,
Wow.
that they're tighter, and people are missing deadlines on a lot of things because there's been so much of a funnel towards the internet. Obviously, it's a digital world, and people are still putting out the newspapers because it's making them enough money that it's still worthwhile. But that's obviously the big next step is people are still trying to build that bridge to get the print product, to get the readers of print over into the digital side. And
Right.
at
Right.
some point, we're obviously going to, not anytime in the near future, but at some point, we're going to be without the print newspaper, without the paper product. But it has made all the difference in the world. It used to be you would be at a game and you would type out your story on a page at a time. You'd take the page out and you'd have to hand it to somebody who would then fax it to the office. Now, even faxes are outdated now.
That's right.
But then, the big technology move was to get the computers, and at that time they were these big, they they were
Yeah.
about they were about the size of a carburetor,
That's right.
and you're lugging these things around the country, but people thought it was an amazing advancement in technology. And then through the years, it's obviously gotten to where we are now that you could. I've never written on my phone. I think some people do in a pinch, but certainly things like the smaller tablets or
Right.
even the laptops that are incredibly light. It's made all the difference just in mobility. But for me, as I come off writing 2 books in the last 5 years, I never could have done anything near what I did without the internet. I can't imagine what talent of the people who wrote books 10 years ago, 50 years ago, anything in that era when you're doing it by page and having to go back and cross out and type over and use the whiteout and XXXXX over words or different things like that. And how about trying to do research?
Oh,
Those are the days where you would have to sit at the library and they would have, was it microfiche,
that's
microfilm?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Can't remember what they called it, but you would go through every single day of the newspaper trying to find the information that you need. And of course, now I flip open my screen and I type in Bill Walton, the freshman debut, Poly Pavilion, and it's all right there. And
Right.
so I appreciate how much of a positive difference it's made for me because uh, I, I I throw rose petals at the feet of the people who did it the old-fashioned way. What talk about heavy lifting on a book? It's made it so much easier for me that I can just flip around topic to topic and get that information right away off hundreds of websites.
And see, I'm going to brag on you here a little bit because I came across your work a handful of years ago. I just went to a Barnes and Noble, and I'm one of those guys, as a former professional basketball coach, I love to learn, I love to grow, I love to evolve. I came across your book on Steve Kerr, and I was wowed. And so immediately I started trying to research you on social media and getting in contact with you because I'm like, this guy has a knack for digging deeper and connecting with his source to provide you a story. And the way that you were able to share stories about Coach Steve Kerr and the way you went about it with your angles, and I mean it's not just clickbait. And I know AI is out there right now, and I'm sure that stuff has got to frustrate someone who is as skilled as you are at finding the proper information to share it with the reader. What does, you know, all the misinformation that's out there, or people who just rush stuff out there and they don't have credible, sources, does that just really get under your skin when you're so detailed and specific and try to tell the story the right way?
Well, not just as somebody trying to tell the story, but as a reader. I'm a sports fan.
Yeah.
I want to read quality work by people that put in the time and understand that line between what's right and what's wrong. So yeah, any phrase you want to use, get under my skin, frustrates me, saddens me. I'm certainly disappointed in the turns that the industry has taken in a lot of different ways. The good news is there's still a lot of talent out there.
That's right.
There's still a lot of people who care about doing it right, doing it with ethics, and but unfortunately, it's sort of become a bit of a conveyor belt that finish the story, next story, finish the story, next story, and that is something I used to do, but I've been fortunate that I've worked at places and had editors who prioritize quality over quantity, and it was
Ah,
never about. There's bosses out there, certain websites, they're expecting what, 5 or 6 stories a
right.
day
Yeah.
from their writers, and it's about let's see what somebody said on social media and then turn that into a story. And okay, now we got to go on social media and get the reactions to that post on social media. And it's become too much of a nonsense factory.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a there's a lot of things I miss about daily journalism as I've gotten more and more into the book world, and now I'm writing one story every 2.5 years. It's just in a book as opposed to before where it was a daily thing. There's a lot that I do miss, but I don't miss that it's become a Kardashian world.
Oh,
Uh,
great term. Right. I think that's fair because there is such a rabbit hole out there of misinformation and, people that don't have the facts and just want to rush the story out there to be first. And then, the sources aren't credible. And the next thing you know, whether it's lawsuits or whatever, I mean, there's an ugly part to it. But yet I look at a guy like you who takes the time, who doesn't rush, who will spend 2 years collecting as much data and information to tell the story appropriately to allow the reader to connect with that subject. And I think, you're right there with the best of the best, Scotty, and how you do it and how you kind of present it and it comes to manifestation for the reader.
I would also say that it's on the reader, the viewer, the listener. It's on the consumer as well. Either I don't know if hold people accountable is the right way to put it, uh, but there's a reason why uh, some of the most highly paid people in sports journalism are the ones that get criticized the most for being a joke. And that's because people tune in. There are people that are really good. They're really bad at delivering information. They're really bad at having accurate um, insight, but they're really good at being able to poke that nerve on people just right that will get people angry or get people to laugh at them. What happens? People criticize them on social media all day and all night. All it does is get these guys raises.
Yeah.
People love the shouters. People love the outrageous. And that has been part of the problem. And it's not just that journalism has lost its way, uh but whoever is taking in the information, the reader, the viewer, the listener, um, isn't putting a priority. Stop going to stop tuning in these channels. The bosses see the ratings. They're not dumb. And if somebody is getting big ratings, that's making the company money, or big clicks in the case of a written story online, clicks or ratings or whatever the outlet the medium is. That's making the company money. That's all the bosses care about. Who's making them money? Let's give this guy a raise. What? He's completely out of his mind and saying ridiculous things? I don't care. He's getting clicks.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Got,
because they may
got
be the
me.
loudest or the most boorish or the most brash doesn't make it correct information.
There's people like the shouters, and they have only themselves to blame that these people are not only on the air or online, but getting the biggest salaries because they're the ones that are sort of creating that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so fair to say. And I think it's eloquently put how you worded that because it's very factual as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. Ladies and gentlemen, we got Scott Howard Cooper here as a guest on the show. Phenomenal author, storyteller, just a great guy. You know, you can tell he has core values, and this is what I'm enjoying. Um, I was interested in what drew me into your book about Steve Kerr, you know, a life. You know, I coached in Beirut, Lebanon, basketball and won a championship there. And I knew Steve Kerr's father was assassinated in Lebanon. And so, you know, little connections like that kind of draw me in to be like, you know what, there is that, you know, 6 degrees of separation, you know, with certain individuals. And the way that you were able to, you know, share those stories, and I can only imagine the hours and hours of interviews of different individuals where you're able to take certain stories or they share with you something a certain way that where you can present that story or that journey of an individual with such precision. And I think it's credible because you've got so much credibility because obviously you were able to make that person feel comfortable when you're interviewing them. But what are the skills that you feel it takes to be able to make that connection with your subject to be able to share that material so eloquently?
The primary subject, or anybody that, you know, if
Yeah,
I'm doing more than
just whoever your subject. Let's say Steve Kerr, for example. What was it about him that you were able to share his story with such precision?
I, I should mention first of all that he did not really do any interviews with me for this book.
Okay.
He did not like the idea. He discouraged it. He had some quotes in there that I got in group settings, but he wouldn't sit down with me one on one. He didn't like the idea of this book being done. But I had been around Coach Steve Kerr and his Warriors for hundreds of days. I had talked to Steve at every level. I talked to him in his hospital room when he blew out his knee as a before senior year at Arizona, and I talked to him as a player, as a GM, as an announcer, and as a coach. I felt like I spoke pretty fluent Steve Kerr,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I had an extensive background, even though he did not want to talk. But a lot of people did talk to me. Um, I think people need to know that you care about doing it right. Most of the people that you talk to in these situations, when you're dealing with somebody like Steve Kerr, who's been around, who's been in the public spotlight since the mid 1980s, on many different levels, most of the people I interviewed were used to being interviewed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, teammates, coaches, administrators slash front office people. So they understand the process. And I think that they get it and they know if somebody's uh, approaching this the right way. They can tell from the questions. Now, maybe at some point they're like, oh, it's too late for me to shut this down. I've already answered 10 minutes of his questions, so I'm screwed. But I think in general, when people say yes or no, they're going to either know who you are or know what the topic is about and feel comfortable.
Sure.
The interesting thing is in both cases, in the UCLA book and in the Steve Kerr biography, some of the most interesting people, and I love being able to say this, some of the most interesting people in the best interviews are unrecognizable names. They're people that uh, aren't the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Phil Jackson people. In the case of Steve Kerr, in the case of UCLA, the same thing. It wasn't Jamal Wilkes and Bill Walton and Jerry West. We missed them, obviously. It wasn't the big names. It's just wonderful when you come across somebody that is willing to share, give of their time just because they want to help or just because they
Oh,
want it, because the subject intrigues them. I think that's one advantage that I've had in both these last two books. People love talking about Steve Kerr because he's such a good guy
that's
and
right.
they want to share their stories. It's a fun thing. And UCLA, I can't tell you the number of people when I got to the end of the interview and I said, gosh, thanks for your time. This has been terrific. You've really, really helped me out. They said, no, no, thank you. I enjoyed the chance to think back on my years in college. It
Mm.
was just fun. And there were great stories and a lot of wins and some heartbreak. And I've been fortunate, as I said, I don't know if it would have been the same if you pick some despicable character and you know, I don't know what it's like for people who go out and do books on mass murderers
Oh,
or different things like that, different, underworld or whores and war or things like that. Um, I had the advantage of two subjects, two topics where people love talking about them. So I can't emphasize that enough. I was the lucky one. Both books are only as good as the people I talk to.
wow. That's so humbly put. And let's talk about it now. Kingdom on Fire, Kareem, Wooden, and Walton. We're going to set that up there for our viewers to watch. You've got a copy there behind you. Um, what was the motivation? I mean, because we talk about UCLA and that dynasty. Again, I'm an Indiana guy growing up, so Coach Wooden, intrigues me. I love to learn about him, find out as much about him as I can. But I mean, we're talking about 7 consecutive titles, 3 perfect records, 88 game win streak, and then the characters in the book that make up the story and the storylines and how they relied on each other. Talk a little bit about how that process came to fruition in your mind to be like, hey, I've got an idea. Here's how I want to go about this for this book. How did that start for you with this one? Because this is a great, great book.
Well, I think part of it was what you just mentioned, the people involved and the subjects. And uh, fortunately, I had been interested in this idea for many years, long before I had a book contract in place and was actually officially starting to write a book. I was informally writing a book, taking a couple hours on a weekend or one free night on a Tuesday or something like that. And I was able to talk to a lot of people who are no longer with us, people who passed long before I started writing this book. So I was sort of squirreling it away. I was just intrigued by the idea of time and place.
Mm,
You take this program that had unprecedented success, that's one thing. Okay. I didn't want to write a basketball only book. I didn't want to line up box scores. But what struck me was, and this obviously is no great revelation because this is an amazing time in American history for good and bad. But to be able to set the UCLA dynasty against the backdrop of America in the 1960s and the early 1970s
right.
with Vietnam and race relations and Watergate and Summer of Love and Kent State, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King. It's obviously, we use the word in the title, tumultuous, and that's what it was. And that was part of that is part of what fascinated me about those 7 championships in a row. That's what the focus of the book. We mentioned the first two, and then in the epilogue, we mentioned the final one in Coach's final season, 1974-75. But the bookends are really the arrival of Lou Alcindor, before he became Kareem Abdul Jabbar, Lou Alcindor to the departure of Bill Walton, superstar center to superstar center. Those are our bookends. 7 championships in a row, and put against those times where um, there was much more of a connection than I realized between those Bruins and the times. It wasn't just that they were living among them; they were participating in them. I think it's pretty well known that Bill got arrested for protesting American involvement in Southeast Asia,
Yep.
and that Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul Jabbar, was emotionally invested in racial relations in the country. But it went much deeper than that. Their stances and uh, John Wooden had a straight line to the Oval Office. He was friends with H.R. Haldeman, Richard Nixon's chief of staff, and Haldeman was the chief fundraiser for this basketball arena that was being done on campus that ended up being Pauley Pavilion. And they were friends for the rest of their lives. John Wooden, in retirement, drove to prison to visit H.R. Haldeman when he was behind bars for Watergate. This was a friendship. It wasn't just
Wow.
that they would kind of wave at each other along the
Yep.
way. So there were things like that. Lou Alcindor's involvement in the Cleveland Summit, the famous gathering of many prominent Black athletes, Jim Brown, Bill Russell, and Muhammad Ali, because Muhammad Ali was refusing to enter the draft. He was a conscientious objector. And there was a lot of talk about, is he going to go to prison? And so they called it a summit, and that's probably a pretty good word. There were about 12 or 14 professional athletes there and one college guy. And there's Lou Alcindor up there on the stage with some of the biggest names in sports. And that's how he fit in into American society. That's how prominent he already was
Right.
as a college student. So I just, and there's so many stories. I can't believe that the number of times that I was writing this where I wrote something and said, really, that, you know, that really happened. Uh, just
I,
a lot of it, there's some irreverence in there because it's just the nuttiness of the times, and there's a lot of serious because of the stakes of everything going on in America at the time. But it was about time and place, that team and that time.
right. I love how you're able to kind of put, you know, because Lou Alcindor at the time, very quiet, not comfortable speaking much, and yet when he's involved with that summit with the predominant names you just mentioned, um, the influence that a Muhammad Ali had on a young Lou Alcindor before he came Kareem Abdul Jabbar and went to the Muslim faith and was more comfortable talking about and standing up for racism and racial issues, within our country.
He was very good at public speaking. Even you go back and look at him in his the announcement when he was a senior at Power Memorial in New York City, and the press conference to announce that he's going to UCLA. He certainly didn't like doing that. He much rather would have been, somewhere in the background holding up a wall, and just hanging out with his buddies and playing hoops. But in that situation, he handled it fine. He was very mature, and
Yeah.
he was the same thing throughout his life. That he's never been a guy that wanted the spotlight. If anything, he wanted to get away from the spotlight. But incredible maturity, even at that young age, that time that we're focusing on high school senior till to college senior. Fascinating story, and Bill Walton, some similarities as well. And excuse me, I should also mention, when you ask about what intrigued me about the story, when you look at the people that sort of held this tent up, you had a black center from New York City, a white center from San Diego, and a coach from Indiana, a grandfatherly coach who the great Los Angeles Times columnist Jim Murray said John Wooden was so square he was divisible by four. And so you had these amazing personalities, and they were contrasts. And uh, John Wooden sort of holding this thing. He was obviously the constant through it all, through the seven. Uh, he's holding it together with tape and bubblegum. And he doesn't love living in Los Angeles. He's always an Indiana farm kid at heart. And my God, there's a lot of freeways out here, and people are not nearly as friendly as we would like. We don't have as many good friends. And he's in a job that, on top of everything, on top of just the general living, his profession is uh, putting an enormous amount of stress on him and just grinding him to bits. And he doesn't like the expectations.
Uh,
And
y- well put. I mean, and you think about his relationship with his wife Nellie and how that kind of kept him grounded and centered to
right,
be able to be a coach, a father figure, a mentor, a role model for such huge personalities during this era. I think that's where you got to give Coach Wooden even more credit, because even though he may not have agreed with that stance, he was still able to kind of support you and allowed you to have a platform to be individually who you were, as long as it didn't divide the team.
Part of it is part of the story that I wanted to write is with a 2020's perspective. And that is, as good as we thought 7 in a row was at the time, as we look back on it now, knowing everything that was going on and some of the personalities and things like that, it is more impressive that you think 7 in a row looked good at the time. It looks a whole lot better now just because of everything they went through. And part of it, that new perspective, is that we're able to see how these guys turned out and you
Right.
see the differences. The John Wooden, America's grandfather, that people got to know in retirement in uh, the 80s and certainly the 90s and the early 2000s, that this kindly guy, that was not John, that was not Coach John Wooden. He was a fireball.
Yeah.
Did not cuss, but certainly, oh my God, he rode the refs. He would say he would say things to other players, to opposing players. He would get on, he was demanding. People, if you played for John Wooden in the 60s or early 70s and you told somebody I just got into a time machine and I fast forwarded it to 1995 or 2005, nobody would have believed you if you would have said, "Oh, John, people, just this gentle soul, and he's a sage, and people sitting at his feet, and gosh, this people just want to hear him talk. He's so full of wisdom." That things like that were just crazy, and also the changes in that was the most dramatic one, and it happened for a few different reasons. That obviously uh, college Abdul Jabbar to adult Abdul Jabbar and college Walton to adult Walton. A lot of that are the life experiences that everybody goes through. People just are going to be different when they're 40 as opposed to when they're 20. You just change. But a lot of that is also realizing that they sort of got to this point. Um, John Wooden and Lou Alcindor had what is basically a business relationship in college. They got along, but they were not close. They didn't hang out. But you look at John Wooden and Kareem Abdul Jabbar in later years, and these guys are family.
Right.
They became much closer. And the same thing with Bill Walton and John Wooden, college Bill Walton, that they clashed more. Coach was worried about Bill Walton in a way he never worried about Lou Alcindor. He thought that Bill Walton was being used, was too much of a follower, was being used by the anti-Vietnam crowd just because he was a big name, and he worried about Bill quite a bit. And same thing, they became family. And Kareem would go over to Coach's condominium in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, and they would watch old westerns, and they'd watch baseball games, and they'd talk about family. And Bill did not live in Los Angeles for any of that time, so he was constantly calling, to the point, he was checking up on Coach. He loved John Wooden. He was checking up on Coach so much that John would kind of have this gag that he would, if Bill would call while people were there, that he would say, "Okay, yes, Bill," and then he'd kind of set down the phone and walk around and do something, and come back 30 seconds later, said, "Oh, okay, Bill, I get it," set it back down and come back and walk around, things like that. So the point being that you sort of have to suspend or set aside the people that we've gotten to know in the 2000s, because um, they were different then. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book. I think that's one of the things that makes it interesting, is you see how much these people have changed, and you could sort of track the changes.
Yeah. Talking about Coach Wooden, he's just so known, there's so many books and there's a lot of articles out about Coach Wooden, but he kind of considered himself a teacher and an educator. And later on, throughout his career, it became more evident that that seemed to be how it kind of was in reality, where, Kareem and Bill talked about Coach with such reverence, just how great and how connected they were, like family. And I think that's neat to see that evolution in them. even though it was abrasive in the beginning for their stances that they took, or maybe disagreements that they had, while they wore the jersey. But man, what a great mentor Coach Wooden became to both those guys, and even helping, Bill with the speech impediment and getting him more comfortable to become a broadcaster as he was later in his career.
He cared deeply. I don't think that that's a surprise statement uh, to anybody who saw him, even from a distance in later years. He was out and about not because he wanted to make money doing commercials or appearances. He was out talking to groups because he loved the chance to be around people. He loved the chance to connect, to make a difference. I think you nailed it, Scott, when you said he was a teacher. That's it. First and foremost, John Wooden was a teacher. For a large portion of his life, basketball was the topic,
Yeah.
but he also saw basketball and sports in general because he was a huge baseball fan and always made himself available to help the other programs at UCLA anytime he could. So he understood the value of sports, but he saw basketball as a chance to teach life lessons. And there was a time that he actually wasn't a teacher. He was an English teacher in high school before, when he was still in Indiana, before he moved up to the college ranks at what is now Indiana State. And then from there, he came out to UCLA, and he was never that classroom teacher anymore. Uh, but there's nothing he enjoyed more than the chance to teach life lessons. And he
Yeah.
did that with basketball. And there are plenty of times, and there's some examples in the book, plenty of times where he drove his players nuts because he wanted to teach life lessons, and they just wanted to get out and hoop.
Yeah.
And but this is the guy that people came to see later in life, where he would give speeches and you could just see people sort of, you could feel people being on the edge of their seat and maybe holding out their hand to catch a droplet of wisdom. And the pyramid of success,
Oh,
late in, that was something that he came up with. I think it was the 40s, maybe the 50s. It's in the book, the exact background on it.
yeah.
But when he was in his 90s, what would have been the early 2000s, um, he was getting hundreds of requests, thousands of requests for the pyramid of success. Coaches who wanted it, coaches who wanted a bunch of copies so they could hand it out to players, teachers, parents, people that had nothing to do with sports, just found his life lessons meaningful. And I don't know that anything more pleased him than getting that kind of feedback, that he made the connection not about basketball, but about how to treat people and how to approach situations.
Wow, what a legacy, and I love how you put that. Just recently here, we lost Bill Walton. Share a couple stories about, maybe not from Bill, but from others who talked about Bill, that the viewers would enjoy, and maybe they don't hear much about, that maybe was omitted from the book, that you're like, oh man, I wish I would have put that in there about Bill, now that, may he rest in peace, part of his legacy.
Boy, narrowing it down is tough.
I bet, yeah.
That's how many good Bill Walton stories are floating around the universe. I'll give you a couple.
Okay.
I'll start, and I'll try to keep them as short as possible so I don't go on
No,
too
this is
long.
great.
But this is one I've been thinking about an awful lot lately because of Bill, and because it also involves Jerry West, who
Mm,
we lost at almost the same time,
that's right.
within a couple weeks, right? And Jerry and Bill were two of my personal favorites.
Oh,
And one of my favorite passages in the book is, there was this old time 1950s style diner in Westwood in Los Angeles, just down the street, a short walk from campus. And a lot of people hung out there. The John Wooden and his coaches loved it. The owner was friendly as heck. He would, some struggling student would come by for a burger and fries, and they'd be at the cash register, and he'd say, "By the way, I slipped in an extra burger for you. Just enjoy." He'd go fishing with a lot of people. Just a wonderful guy, Hollis Johnson. Not
Mm.
around. I would have loved to talk to Hollis. Anyway, there's this old school diner, and Jerry West is a superstar guard with the Los Angeles Lakers. Bill Walton is a freshman center, still not eligible for the varsity at UCLA. And they're both lost. Uh, Jerry is in an uncomfortable position because he's not terribly happy with his life. There's a lot of anxiety. He's got some issues in his personal life. He's stressed out to no end, as it was what became the familiar Jerry West story later in life. And here's Bill Walton, who's loving being at UCLA, loving the college experience, but really struggling to fit in. He's feeling very awkward. You mentioned the stuttering problem he had. He's not good in social situations. But one thing he did love was basketball, and in particular, the Los Angeles Lakers. He grew up in San Diego. The Lakers were his team. Chick Hearn, the broadcaster, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor. He idolized Jerry West. And so here comes this connection of two guys looking for just quiet time and a little bit of normalcy. And here you have this friendship that develops between superstar Jerry West and, again, freshman Bill Walton. And it's fascinating the way they needed each other. And I go into great detail in the book if people want to know more. The benefits that these two people brought to each other's life is fascinating, and the way they fit in. And John Wooden is there quite a bit, and John Wooden is having conversations with Jerry West. Now, how many millions of bucks would I give to have been at that table at that time? Uh, it's 1970, 71, 72 in Los Angeles. And Jerry West described it as just two small town guys hanging out, shooting the breeze. Well, no, it's
Wow.
John Wooden and Jerry West. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
this moment of Bill just appreciating, just saying, I'm just there gobbling down food and hanging out with Jerry West, and life is good for those hour and a half that they spent together that day.
See,
Just
I think
incredible.
that's special and it's so meaningful because, it's relationships like that where there's someone that you can depend on, lean on, count on, during tough times or maybe needing guidance and direction where, a lot of people aren't aware of those types of support systems with these legendary icons or icons in the making. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting to know how people are able to impact others, just with their time. And I do hope the viewers go out and support and get this book, Kingdom on Fire, because I mean, if you're a historian and if you're a hoop historian and you think about the time era that this was written and what it's about, Scott, you did a masterful job. And I encourage and I implore everybody to go out and seek this book to add to their library because they will be enriched, with the information that is shared in the content that's within.
Thank you. That's incredibly nice. And as I said before, whatever success this book has is because of the people that shared their time, and people were incredibly giving to me of their time and their memories. So it's all credit to the people who lived that life. I was just the guy that sort of cobbled it all together.
Oh, it's just great stuff, Scotty. We've got 3 or 4 minutes here. Are there any words of advice or encouragement or words of support you can give to other people out there who have got that journalistic bug that they want to pursue writing but don't know where to start or how to begin? What words of encouragement would you give to those out there who want to become writers or authors or storytellers?
If you feel like it's a job that you want to do that as a way to get money, don't do it. If you have the passion, if you feel like, see, when I don't write, not every single day, but if I go a while without writing, I miss it. I truly enjoy the writing process, the research, the interviewing, but especially the writing. If you feel that passion, you've made a good decision. And connect with people. The writer community is a strong community. I obviously don't know that literally in terms of geographically. I don't know what's going to be in people's area, but now with the internet, there's certainly ways to connect with anybody, including me on social media. I'm happy to answer any questions. And there's hundreds of people, thousands of people out there that will tell you the same thing. Just if there's somebody you like, maybe sports writing isn't your thing, but you like entertainment or political writing or science or documentaries. I'm not just talking about writing. It has to do with anything in journalism. Reach out. People are going to be kind. As I said at the very start, I've been incredibly lucky. The people who helped me, if I can pay it forward, boy, it's my pleasure. And I think that there's a ton of people out there that'll tell you the same thing. Reach out to somebody and say, can I come by the station and have, see how you guys work, or the radio station or something like that, or can we just trade some emails?
See, I think it's great advice. And man, truly, sincerely, not just because you're sitting next to me right now and we're sharing this time, I have truly been looking forward to this conversation with you, the person, the individual. And yeah, you humbly share that, you're very lucky and fortunate, but you know what? You have a lot of skill, and your creativity and the way that you put a story together for the reader. uh like I'm saying, you're the best of the best, and it's people like you who drive and make this show what it is. So I'm eternally grateful for your time, your stories, your wisdom, your expertise for the viewers out there. It Man, I feel like a kid on Christmas Eve, and I'm just so excited that it feels like, this 50 minutes has gone by so fast, and we didn't even peel hardly any layers of that onion.
Well, thanks for a marvelous conversation. This has been a blast. But more than anything, thanks for all the positivity you bring to this world. And I'm not just saying in this conversation. I mean, I know your reputation. Uh, I know the way you touch people, and we can't have enough Scott Fields in this universe. So keep it going.
Well, Scotty, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is Scott Howard Cooper, uh, award-winning author, storyteller, just a Hall of Fame human being. Please go out and support him. Grab that book for your library. I think you're going to walk away from it uh, being inspired, but yet empowered with more knowledge of that era. So, Scotty, again, congratulations. Thank you so much, my friend. Love to cross paths with you, share, break bread together, and again, grow this relationship. I think you're one in a million, my friend. Thank you.
I would love that. I can't wait till we talk again.
You got it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Coach Scott Field Show. Please see us on DBTV exclusively. And again, subscribe to that YouTube channel and continue to support. And if you enjoyed this content, share that content for others. Be blessed, and we'll see you. Thank you so much.